It's actually the people around the whole world logging onto Netflix last night to find not one, not two, but 3 episodes from the new Harry and Meghan documentary. And after years of speculation, we got to hear their side of the story, their relationship, and also what happens beyond the tabloid.
The message was brief, formal, and devastating. Meghan had expected her place inside the Royal Ascot box to mark a carefully managed return to royal life. Instead, she discovered that Prince William had quietly removed her name from the final guest list. There was no public announcement, no dramatic confrontation, and no warning from the palace. Just one altered document, and the sudden realization that a door she believed remained open had finally been closed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stared at the screen, while Harry reviewed their travel plans beside her. Royal Ascot, the famous annual horse racing gathering attended by the monarch, was never just another social event. The Royal Box, a private enclosure reserved for the sovereign's family and chosen guests, showed the world who remained trusted, accepted, and close to the crown. A place inside it carried meaning. Losing that place carried even more. She read the formal message twice. Then she turned the phone face down and pressed her fingers against the table. Harry noticed the change immediately. He believed an official had made an error, perhaps confusing an early schedule with the final one. Meghan shook her head. The language was too careful, too final. Someone with real authority had intervened. William had done exactly that. The prince personally approved a revised seating list, removed Meghan's invitation, and instructed palace staff not to reserve a chair for her inside the enclosure. The first version had already passed preliminary approval, the early stage when names are checked before final confirmation. Her absence was not accidental. It was a decision. A palace aide later confirmed the truth during a documented internal conversation with a senior household secretary. William had requested the papers late that evening. He studied the list alone, drew one firm line through Meghan's name, and wrote 4 words beside it: "Remove from private enclosure." Then he placed the pen down without changing his expression. Harry's disbelief hardened into anger. Meghan's pain became quieter, and therefore more dangerous. She understood that the cancellation was not only about a seat at the races. Her appearance would have suggested reconciliation, renewed trust, and perhaps a path back into the monarchy's visible inner circle. William had decided that such a message could not be sent. And beneath Harry's anger, an older fear returned. His family was closing ranks again. But as Meghan tried to understand why her place had disappeared, the real emotional battle was already taking shape between 3 people who saw the royal box and the future of the monarchy in completely different ways. For Meghan, the invitation represented recognition. For Harry, it offered proof that reconciliation was still possible. For William, however, the same empty seat carried a far more dangerous meaning. It threatened to blur the line between private family contact and official royal acceptance. Behind the formal language were 2 brothers, divided by memory, loyalty, and years of public wounds, and one woman realizing that her return had been stopped before she could take a single step. Meghan had imagined Royal Ascot as the safest return. The annual racing gathering, where the royal family appears before the public under carefully controlled conditions, required no speech, no interview, and no explanation of old pain. She could stand beside them, smile, and leave. For her, that appearance would have said what private calls never could. She had not been erased. Harry understood why it mattered, but the cost frightened him. When Meghan said she had never expected warmth from William, but had expected basic respect after an invitation was extended, he did not answer. He walked to the window and stayed there. Defending his wife meant confronting his brother. Confronting the prince risked destroying the fragile contact that remained between them. William saw the invitation through a colder lens. As the senior working royal shaping the monarchy's public future, he believed every person inside the royal box, the private enclosure reserved for the sovereign's family and approved guests, communicated trust, unity, and official acceptance. Meghan's presence would not look casual. It would look like restoration. He had not objected. Her name appeared on an early planning list, and William allowed it to remain. Then a briefing reached him. Advisors warned that broadcasters, newspapers, and foreign media would present her attendance as proof that the Sussex dispute had ended and royal confidence had returned. Catherine knew the invitation existed before it disappeared. During a recorded private conversation summarized for the household file, she warned William that the appearance would be read as full restoration, whether the family intended that message or not. She did not demand Meghan's removal. She forced him to face the meaning of the seat. Catherine found him alone with the guest file open. She asked whether he was certain. William closed the folder and answered, "I am certain about what the box means." The words were calm, but the decision carried years of hurt. The briefing explained the danger, yet it did not create William's fear. One earlier encounter had already convinced him that Meghan would never see Ascot as merely personal. To understand why one invitation became impossible, the story must return to the private Windsor encounter that transformed William's caution into a firm and irreversible decision. The cancellation did not begin with Ascot. It began months earlier behind a closed door at Windsor, during a conversation meant to reduce tension between the Sussexes and the royal household. What started as a cautious discussion about future family appearances ended with one sentence that William could not forget. Meghan believed she was asking for clarity. The prince heard something else entirely, a demand that private reconciliation be transformed into public royal recognition before trust had been rebuilt. William had agreed to the Windsor meeting because Harry wanted a path forward. The discussion was limited to family occasions, security arrangements, and ceremonial events. No photographers were permitted. No public statement would follow. He wanted family contact kept separate from royal status, because one private meeting could not erase distrust. Meghan felt that separation tightening around her. Each time the conversation distinguished between being welcomed as family and appearing within official royal spaces, her frustration deepened. Official royal spaces were events and settings that visibly represented the monarchy, not merely private family life. To her, the distinction sounded less like caution and more like a permanent barrier. Harry tried to ease the pressure, but William remained controlled. The prince believed Meghan was asking the palace to display public confidence before the private damage had been repaired. She believed he was demanding proof of loyalty while withholding every sign that reconciliation was real. Neither side raised its voice. That restraint made the exchange more dangerous. Then, Meghan asked the question that changed everything. Would an appearance inside the Royal Ascot box show that she and Harry had been fully welcomed back? William paused. The royal box, a private enclosure reserved for the sovereign's family and approved guests, was no longer a simple seat in her mind. It had become a public certificate of restored standing. William pushed his chair back, placed both hands on the table, and quietly said, "Family cannot be used as a public certificate." Meghan heard rejection. Harry heard a warning. William heard the boundary he had to defend. After the couple left, he instructed staff through a documented household note to send every future invitation involving them to him before final approval. Months later, a hospitality committee prepared the first Ascot list without knowing about that instruction. When William saw Meghan's name, the Windsor exchange returned instantly. He removed it. When Meghan discovered that one old conversation had decided her fate, she refused to remain silent and demanded to speak with him directly. The invitation had been removed through quiet paperwork, but the next chapter would not remain quiet, because Meghan wanted the man behind the decision to explain it to her face. When William finally accepted the call, no advisors remained in the room, and no carefully written palace statement stood between them. Meghan did not begin with greetings. She asked one direct question. Why had he allowed her to believe she was invited, before quietly removing her? The prince answered with equal bluntness. What followed was not a discussion about horse racing or seating. It was the confrontation both had postponed for years, compressed into one unforgiving conversation. Meghan had rejected the offer to speak through palace secretaries. She wanted no polished message, no softened wording, and no distance between herself and the man who made the decision. William agreed only after insisting that the conversation remain private. He had seen too many family disputes escape into public commentary and return sharpened into weapons. She accused him of hiding personal punishment behind protocol. Protocol, the formal system of rules governing royal conduct and appearances, had become the language through which her humiliation was delivered. Her voice stayed controlled, but her hand tightened around the edge of the table as she described discovering the cancellation through an altered itinerary. William did not interrupt. When she finished, he told her the decision was not revenge. Meghan could not claim the symbolic power of a royal appearance, he said, while remaining separate from the duties, limits, and discipline attached to that privilege. She answered that she had planned to arrive quietly, avoid interviews, and leave without speaking to the press. Private intentions do not control public meaning, William replied. Meghan leaned closer. Was I ever truly invited? He met her eyes. Not by me. The words landed harder than any official statement. She asked whether he had already judged her permanently. William removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and answered, I am judging what the institution can survive. Then came the revelation. He admitted that removing her was not only about preventing confusion at one event, it was meant to establish a boundary that future organizers could not ignore. No committee would again mistake family contact for restored royal standing. Meghan heard finality. William heard necessity. Neither heard reconciliation. For years, both had spoken through interviews, statements, and representatives. Now direct honesty really exposed the wound beneath every argument. Neither trusted the other to define what forgiveness should mean. The call ended without raised voices, yet the silence afterward felt brutal. She remained still beside Harry, while William sat alone, knowing the next challenge would come from his father. Meghan ended the call feeling rejected, yet inside the palace, another conflict was beginning, as the king confronted the uncomfortable truth that William had acted without asking for his permission. The most shocking part of the cancellation was not that Meghan had lost her seat. It was that William possessed the authority to remove it. When Charles opened the revised Ascot file, he saw more than a changed guest list. He saw evidence that the future king had begun exercising control over the monarchy's public boundaries with growing confidence. The decision forced father and son into a private reckoning over power, mercy, and who now determined access to royal life. Charles sat with the file open before him and read the handwritten instruction again. The hospitality schedule, the official plan listing approved guests and seating arrangements, had already passed through William's office. As Prince of Wales, he controlled the immediate party connected to himself and Catherine, including access to the private royal enclosure. That authority had grown quietly, because the king had allowed his elder son greater influence over appearances that would shape the monarchy's future image. Still, the method troubled Charles. Meghan had first been invited, then removed without warning. He feared the decision would look cold and confirm Harry's darkest belief, that the family preferred exclusion to conversation. William did not deny the pain. He argued that reversing course would damage every boundary the palace had tried to make clear. Compassion without clarity creates greater pain later, the prince told him. Camilla listened before asking whether Meghan could be offered another place at Ascot, away from the royal box. The queen consort hoped a smaller gesture might soften the rejection without restoring official status. William refused. Any visible compromise, he warned, would be treated as a retreat and turned into proof that pressure could change royal decisions. Charles lowered his eyes to the page. His silence carried disappointment, but also reluctant recognition. The future king had not acted carelessly. He had acted with the certainty of someone already carrying part of the crown's burden. The king lifted his pen and hesitated above the signature line. Are you prepared to carry what follows? William met his father's gaze. I already am. Then Charles signed the final schedule. The act did more than confirm Meghan's absence. It publicly transferred responsibility for the boundary to father and son together, while quietly confirming William's control over the royal box. Camilla understood what the signature meant. Charles understood what it would cost. William knew the consequences would now move beyond documents, reaching Harry, Catherine, and every person expected to appear inside that enclosure when the cameras finally arrived. With the king's signature, the cancellation became irreversible, and the people closest to the conflict were forced to confront what Meghan's empty place would now say about each of them. Final decisions have a different weight. Before Charles signed the schedule, Harry could still believe that someone might intervene. Afterward, hope disappeared. Meghan's absence was no longer a temporary dispute or administrative confusion. It had become official royal policy for one of the year's most visible gatherings. In California, anger gave way to silence. At Windsor, Catherine watched William carry the consequences alone. And between the brothers, one cancelled invitation reopened every wound they had tried not to name. The Ascot schedule moved through royal households, security teams, transport coordinators, and event planners. Every copy carried the same absence. Meghan's name was gone. Palace staff received one explanation. Attendance inside the royal box reflected current official and family arrangements. The royal box, the private enclosure reserved for the monarch's family and approved guests, had become the clearest line the palace could draw. Harry called Charles before the papers had finished circulating. He asked only whether his father had approved the removal. The king did not hide behind an aide or soften the truth. He confirmed that he had signed the schedule. That answer cut deeper than anger. Harry ended the call, placed the phone on the kitchen counter, and stood motionless. Meghan approached him, but he kept his eyes lowered. He chose the paper over the conversation, Harry said. Meghan told him not to plead for the invitation. She would not enter a place where her presence had to be argued over after she had already been made to feel unwanted. Her refusal sounded firm, yet beneath it lived something more painful. She had hoped the invitation meant the family was willing to separate old wounds from the future. At Windsor, Catherine feared the cancellation would be read as personal hostility. William insisted it was an institutional boundary, a rule protecting the monarchy's public meaning rather than a punishment aimed at Meghan. Still, the prince admitted that he had known Harry would blame him. He cancelled it anyway. William told Catherine that avoiding his brother's anger could no longer guide royal decisions. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his closed fist. His fingers relaxed, but the decision did not. That quiet touch changed something. Catherine did not ask him to restore the seat. She asked him to stop allowing official language to carry a pain only two brothers could address. William understood. For the first time since the cancellation, he reached for his phone without an advisor beside him. The public boundary remained firm, but behind it, William finally recognized that authority alone could not settle the pain between brothers. And so he made the call he had avoided for too long. For once, there were no courtiers, no press officers, and no statements waiting to be approved. William called Harry as a brother, not as the heir managing a royal crisis. The invitation would not be restored, and neither man pretended otherwise. Yet beneath the anger was something more painful. Both understood that Ascot had become a symbol of everything they had lost. One wanted a path back. The other feared that opening the gate too quickly would destroy what trust remained. Catherine had urged William to speak before palace language hardened the wound. Palace language meant the formal wording used by royal staff to protect the institution, often at the cost of human feeling. The prince closed the door to his study, dismissed the aide waiting outside, and called without warning. Harry answered alone. Meghan was not beside him, but her humiliation entered the conversation immediately. Harry said the cancellation had felt deliberate. He accused his brother of deciding what reconciliation should look like, while ignoring what he and Meghan actually needed. William did not deny that the method had been harsh. He admitted the altered itinerary had caused pain, but he insisted the alternative would have created a false picture of unity. Trust cannot be performed before it exists, William said. Harry asked whether any route back remained for them. The prince answered carefully. Family contact was still possible, but official royal symbolism could not be used as proof that everything had healed. Royal symbolism, the public meaning carried by ceremonies, titles, and appearances, affected the whole monarchy. One seat could announce forgiveness before forgiveness had truly begun. Silence followed. Harry seemed ready to end the call, then asked the question William had not expected. What would he have done if the invitation had never become public? William answered without hesitation. He would still have cancelled it. The truth hurt Harry, but it also stripped away one final suspicion. The decision had not been driven only by headlines, fear, or public pressure. His brother believed it was necessary. William rested his forehead against one hand. "I do not want to lose you, but I will not pretend nothing happened." Harry's reply came quietly. "Then stop speaking to me only when something goes wrong." Neither brother apologized, neither surrendered. Yet they agreed to speak again without secretaries, statements, or official demands between them. It was not reconciliation. It was something smaller, weaker, and perhaps more honest, after years of distance. A beginning. Their call ended without victory, but with one fragile promise to speak again. Hours later, that private progress was overwhelmed by a headline that turned Meghan's missing seat into a global royal verdict. By sunrise, the decision was no longer private. One front page transformed a changed seating list into a public declaration of royal exile. Commentators debated whether William had protected the monarchy or punished Meghan. Crowds gathered near the Ascot gates. Cameras searched every carriage, and one empty place became more closely watched than the people actually attending. Yet beneath the noise, the palace remained disciplined. No reversal came. No substitute invitation appeared. The boundary held. The story broke after two versions of the Ascot guest schedule circulated among event workers. The first included Meghan. The final copy did not. A guest schedule, the official list used to coordinate approved attendees, security, and seating, had exposed the decision more clearly than any statement could. Meghan saw the headline on her phone before breakfast. The private rejection had become public humiliation. She had not merely been excluded. The world now knew that she had first been welcomed, then deliberately removed. Harry watched her expression change and understood that no explanation could soften that wound. William followed the coverage beside Catherine. Advisors suggested a stronger response, one that would defend the palace by questioning Meghan's motives. The prince refused. He would defend the boundary, but he would not degrade her to justify it. Catherine supported that choice, even as she warned that silence would allow others to define the story. Then the front page appeared. A national newspaper printed a full-page image of the royal box beneath the headline, "The seat William took away." Outside Ascot's main gate, spectators lifted copies above the barriers as royal vehicles arrived. The phrase spread across broadcasts within minutes, turning one seating decision into a brutal national argument about power and belonging before the royal family. During live coverage, one broadcaster pointed toward an unoccupied chair inside the enclosure and called it the place originally intended for Meghan. The royal box, the private area reserved for the monarch's family and approved guests, had become a public symbol of rejection. The palace finally released one sentence. It confirmed that the final arrangements had been approved by the Prince of Wales and the King. No junior aide had acted alone. As the statement was read aloud, William straightened his jacket, looked toward Charles, and received a small nod. The monarch's gesture carried no celebration. It was recognition. Father and son now shared the consequences openly. Meghan knew who had closed the door. William knew the world was watching him stand behind it. Once responsibility was publicly confirmed, there was nowhere left to hide. Not for Meghan, not for Harry, and not for William. Because the final meaning of the empty seat had become impossible to deny. In the end, Meghan did not enter the Royal Ascot box. William did not reverse his order, and the monarchy did not collapse beneath the argument. But none of them emerged unchanged. The cancellation exposed a truth that years of careful language had concealed. Family connection and royal acceptance were no longer the same thing. Meghan wanted recognition, Harry wanted a bridge, and William wanted boundaries. The empty seat became the place where those competing hopes finally met, and where one of them had to give way. Royal Ascot continued under the revised seating plan. William, Catherine, Charles, and Camilla appeared together, presenting calm continuity despite the private conflict beneath it. Royal Ascot, the annual racing event closely associated with the monarch and senior family members, mattered because attendance inside its private enclosure signaled trust, rank, and official acceptance. Meghan stayed away and issued no public challenge. Her silence became a deliberate refusal to turn rejection into another open battle. Meghan finally understood that the royal box could not give her the dignity or belonging she had hoped to reclaim. The decision hurt, but it ended the uncertainty. Harry reached a different conclusion. He remained angry, yet his honest call with William showed him that any return would begin through private rebuilding, not symbolic appearances designed to announce unity before trust existed. William carried the hardest truth quietly. Leadership had forced him to accept personal blame for an institutional boundary, a formal limit protecting how the monarchy presents itself to the public. He did not celebrate Meghan's absence. He understood that necessity could still leave damage behind. After Ascot, William sent Harry a private message recorded in their personal correspondence. It offered no apology for the cancellation. It simply honored their promise to keep talking. Harry answered with 2 words: "Next week." William later paused after leaving the royal box and removed his Ascot name badge. Catherine joined him. "It was necessary," he said. "Necessary things can still hurt," she replied. That exchange became the final verdict. Meghan's cancelled invitation was not revenge and not a temporary seating dispute. It marked the permanent separation between private family ties and automatic access to the monarchy's official stage. The crown gained clarity. Meghan gained painful certainty. Harry and William kept one narrow channel open. And so the empty seat delivered its final message. Royal belonging could no longer be assumed. Public unity could no longer be performed. And any future healing would have to begin away from the cameras, one honest conversation at a time. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.